Hi guys, it's Lily here and I'm back again with Talk Crypto to Me. I'm joined by Robin from PropChain. We're just going to be having a little chit chat today. We want to talk a bit about women in crypto, a bit about your project and how all of that relates together and really just benefiting the industry. How can we make this industry better? What you're doing to make it better, what I'm doing as a woman to make it better, and yeah, how much positivity we want to see. So why not let's have a little chat about women in the industry?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great topic because I think it's a highly undervalued side of the business. And I think it's not just a crypto thing, to be very honest, because with my background in centralized finance, I've always seen that we are quite overpopulated from a male dominance point of view. And I think that's actually a shame because I guess there's a whole lot of very highly talented women that don't really get the chances that they deserve in this industry, which is interesting in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm from a corporate background, so I worked in corporate finance for 3 years and I have to completely agree. I think, one, I kind of think like it's not that accommodating to women as an environment in a way. I kind of felt that, and I didn't always feel like I was part of the industry that I was working in. I wasn't as well accepted. A lot of the culture was going to the pubs. I mean, I was obviously in London, so it was a bit different.
Always a good bet.
But like a lot of the times it was like people going to the pub, spending all evening in the pub, and I just didn't quite feel part of it, like getting absolutely smashed, not really caring about what they were even there to talk about.
Not at all, not at all. I think that what you have really seen over the past years, especially when you look at the crypto space in general, is that I think there has been quite of an uptrend for women that made their entrances in the space. And I'm not sure if that was always the right like underlying values that were appreciated there. It's always kind of this degen movement chasing the women that are entering the space. And I think that that's something we should really try and get into change. But I guess that also has kind of to do with the immaturity of the space. And if you look at traditional finance and corporate finance in general, then I do think that the roles that are there, where women are basically playing part, they are taken quite seriously. When you compare exactly that same stuff in the crypto space, then it's a whole different ballgame. But in general, we need more maturity in the space.
That is true. That is very true, because really, if you think back, when the whole financial system started up, there was hardly any women.
No.
And then it has adapted better, that there are still a lot more women 100%. Prominent in the industry.
100%.
But it's sort of, how do we get more women into the industry?
Yeah, I think it's also kind of like what kind of products and stuff are being built, right? So I think that the majority when we go all the way back to like history in general, it has always been kind of the fact that the male community have been providing, right, for women. And I think that slowly started to change around with this whole emancipation thing of women getting into more of a sustainable way of living. And I guess that what we have really seen is that kind of flowed down all the way to work and industries, but also jurisdictions. Because I think, for example, Europe is way more of an open culture for women entering a market where they can work and where they are being taken seriously, compared to, for example, Middle East is actually really well developing now for the last years. Sure. But if you look back like 10 years ago, it was way less, I believe. And the same goes for Asia, for example. So I guess it's also really a jurisdictional thing. And how I think that we see this develop now is that really the world is heading more towards that change that they want to achieve, right? So that's interesting. And then I also think, like, what kind of products and communities do you build where women can really participate in? It's actually something where we have quite some discussions about internally in our business. We want to find out how we can also empower that community, because building a product is one, but also kind of diversifying your reach on who that actual user is actually a very interesting metric where not too many firms or projects are actually going really in depth into. So we are trying to build actually a community for female investors and really educating them as well on kind of the product and the services that you are launching. So I guess that is a step that more communities, more products, more projects, more companies should be taking in the first place, because it's a highly untapped industry in the end, with huge opportunity.
It's decentralized as well. Like, we're talking about that as an industry. So really it shouldn't matter. Gender shouldn't matter at all, because anyone should be able to be involved. And I think one of the big problems I find is that at events. Like, I hardly see many females feeling comfortable to be there.
No, exactly. And I think also that is kind of making sense because, I think we've all known and seen what the events are like. And in general, I'm not a huge fan of the events because I've always seen that there's a lot of luck diggers is what I call them.
Luck diggers.
People chasing luck. And I think that especially I have a very strong ability to kind of compare these events, right? So you can have like the very corporate events, or then you have this absolute degen events. And I think also like the balance there between women and men is much different. I was on the European blockchain convention, which we can then really scale into very corporate way of applying blockchain in the industry. And there were actually quite some women. You see that space is way further developed. So they have actually developers that are females. They have the CTOs. They have actually the finance people that are arranging it all, CFOs, you name it. A lot more females. Then you go into this kind of NFT-driven shitcoin project-based events, and you see that there are hardly any. So it's kind of the thing that balances out to the wrong side.
I'm not sure if it's maybe one that women actually are so well versed in certain ways that they see all these scam projects and they can't be bothered to go to these events. Potentially,
that
we could look at it like that. Like we're so into what we're looking at and we understand it that we actually choose not to go. Right. I also think women in business, it is good to appreciate the fact we operate differently.
Yeah, 100%. But I also think that gives opportunity because we have seen that since we have been onboarding women in, for example, our organization, we have over 30 people employed, where we are currently slowly trying to up our percentages. For us, it really had a very, very impactful change, actually, because the culture becomes much different. And I guess that a lot more leaders and a lot more CEOs and COOs and also HR departments should be considering that, as we have seen really positive change. Responsibility-wise, there's a lot more to gain from a female than a male, something that I really experience. The ownership is in general much higher because they have this strong kind of desire to prove themselves in the industries that we operate in. And I guess that's really interesting and should be considered by more. So it all starts with everything, with every single form of change or maturity or whatsoever in any space, in any product, in any project. It starts with yourself, right? And making that move as a leader, as a creator to get into that kind of direction. So that's a pretty interesting topic, and it keeps us busy as an organization as well, actually.
Yeah, because it's also making sure that you're finding women with the right skill sets. Have women been as trained in these industries as men? I mean, I can imagine in terms of developers, I do have female friends that are developers, but it's still quite heavily dominated. So it's also even going back into schooling systems.
But it will take time, right? So that's where it always starts. And that's also with like getting, for example, female investor communities built up.
Yeah,
like there's such a barrier to go over. But when you see that some are actually stepping over that barrier, there's mostly a fair group of people following. And I guess that's very interesting. That's also something that we are really strongly focused on right now in the product launches that we do, but also in investment products in general that we create, is how do we make sure that they are as digestible that actually every single person can kind of jump on these products, which is also a very interesting topic in general in the space, because how many projects and how many companies do we see that come up with great ideas, they raise the funds, they start developing, they launch an MVP, and then at that point, the product is just as good as the number of users that you get, and they absolutely fail in getting those users in. So if you reverse engineer that kind of, you will always come back to the point, how do I build a product and who do I empower to use that product? And then I think this whole male-female thing is not even relevant anymore. It's kind of like, how do you create something that people need? And it doesn't really matter if that's a female, it doesn't really matter if it's a male. And I guess that's a very actual and relevant topic, especially in the crypto space. I mean, fintech sees a lot of failures, but crypto sees 10 times or maybe even 100 times more failures because of the fact that they simply fail to gain users. So
yeah, I think actually definitely making sure that you don't segregate people and you allow people to come together. As you say, your investors can be both male and female, so why not let them integrate? It's I kind of I'm against like just doing like women only events. I think it's great for community, for some community things. I think it's great to sit down with a small group of women, amazing. But when it's like large scale events that's just women, I'm like, but we're all the target audience.
It can be an amplifier. I mean, like if you can stabilize like these kind of groups of women that can then drag that forward on different ones, then I fully agree. You should have these specific
like small
events, but make them small and utilize that group of people to then go out there and kind of open it all up. But at the same time, we should have more founders that are females. I think that will actually really establish this space in a whole different manner. Because right now it's mostly not the founder role that is in I don't know many female founders, to be honest.
No, I do agree. I mean, I do like work at lots of conferences, and most panel discussions will not be females that are founders. It might be they have an involvement in the company, but you don't hear it as often. And I think maybe it's also because women don't have that support to start their businesses in the industry potentially.
Yeah, I think that's also something from an investor point of view, right? Like it all starts with capital. Like you can have great ideas and you can have a lot of great team members, but as long as the lifeblood is not in your firm or in your project, it will never go off ground. And I guess that in general, that there you have it again. Also, the investment space is really a male-dominated kind of industry where decision makers tend to always kind of attract to whatever is there from a male point of view, which is pretty interesting because we have been investing in quite some female founders as well in the tech space. And what I really see is that I have a much better relation with those kind of relationships than I have with any other male founders that we are financing or where we are investing in, simply because of the ownership. And that's something where we also look now in the VC angle that we are, or the VC arm that we're building. It's really like, how can we make sure that you create kind of an incubator style platform where it doesn't really matter who you are, you can come up with your idea and you have it all. Because that will be the only way how we will be fueling that movement into establishing more founders that are female, but also male founders, by the way. I mean, we see it left, right, and center that founders in general, they get funding pre-seed from communities and that kind of stuff, but they never really hit the home run because of the fact that they simply don't manage to bridge themselves into that next funding round. And that is mainly because of the fact that their initial investor communities are simply fully unaligned with where they are investing in. So it's a one-time thing, and then they burn through it all, and then you got this, you're a scammer. Because you didn't make it to. But it's actually logical that you don't.
It is hard. I think it definitely is hard in this industry too, especially as being in a bear market. People are less likely to give investment opportunities. Where
it filters out, them? Right?
Yeah,
it really cuts down the crap, I guess, when you look at the industry. I mean, I've been, as I mentioned, my background is not in the crypto space, obviously, but I'm now dancing around there for nearly 6 years. And I think what I've really noticed over time is that there's so much immaturity like in the space that it's also very hard to create sustainability. I mean, in the bull market, there's money for grabs, left, right, and center, right? And people start chunking in 10K, 20K, 50K in any round that you pretty much launch. For our latest project with PropChain, for example, we have been completely building that in the bear market, which is a very challenging thing if I would compare it to the stuff that we have been advising and building back then in the bull markets. At the same time, this is what the industry needs, because every time we think that we hit that certain stage of maturity in the market, we mostly see that that's kind of bull market driven. The market slashes down and bang, 80% of the market cap vanishes, right? Or even more. And I guess that what we have seen now is we had many of those runs. So we had these bull runs, then we had these massive bear corrections. And actually every single time we added onto the maturity of the space. The only thing that I really feel like right now is that what we really need to get into the next stage of maturity is regulation. And that's really why we said 2 years ago, we are going to be fully focused on building concepts that are fully regulatory compliant, that go more into the security side of the industry, Because the whole DeFi movement in general, I had a very interesting discussion on that this morning with a blockchain architect. It's kind of a fugazi, right? I think nothing great in society ever came from democracy. I think that all great stuff in society has been driven by great leadership, and that kind of vanishes out the whole belief of democracy in DeFi, which we have seen, because we have seen the lending platforms that are pushing out insanely inflated returns, lending on lending on lending. We have seen all of the centralized exchanges absolutely abusing the client funds. We have seen all of the drama on DeFi with the hacks and the DeFi protocols that in general were set up to fail when they launched. And right now we really go into that next stage. And I think the next stage is really tokenization, where we're moving in now, which is more of a regulated nature, I guess. But that's really where I see that DeFi is also having its malfunctions, basically, and how we should be solving them, simply by having some form of centralization in there.
Oh, okay. So interesting you say that, because obviously most people within this industry are very pro decentralization because they want to remove the need for having an overarching presence and control of their money or whatever it is that they're doing. But you're saying having some form of centralization.
It's not bad, you know. I think that there's a form of centralization that is always needed, which can be fueled by decentralization.
But how about an example at FTX when you have someone?
Yeah, that's a whole different ballgame. But I guess that's also something where I think that if we are talking about firms that are running in these kind of numbers, you're talking about multiple billions here, and they're running their administrations in QuickBooks, then I guess that kind of gives you the nature of where things are going wrong in that space. And that's simply because of the fact that that whole centralization part wasn't present. And then I'm not talking about the organization being centralized, but then I'm really talking about what is the actual controlling factor of such an organization. And I think that's where it becomes really interesting, because that's where you could be utilizing decentralization as kind of a community controlling factor on the centralized kind of play, where a regulator or a government or whatsoever can be interfering as well. Do I say that a government there should have a full control over those assets? No, not at all. But there needs to be somewhat of an oversight, right?
Yeah.
And I think how DeFi is structured till today is that it's all from this beautiful fairy tale that we will control our finances and the world of finance all together. But there is where emotions come into play, and those will never disappear, because it's the basic nature of a human being. Greed, fear, uncertainty, doubt, those are stakeholders in this ecosystem, right? Because DeFi is driven then, if we are going into kind of a control state again, and we have a decentralized ecosystem managing finances, but we have some greedy people that form a group, obviously taking back governance by having a major part of the governance power or whatsoever that they are centralizing again there, you still have an unfunctioning ecosystem. And I guess that's something where a lot of, I think that's where a lot of dreamers and believers, very core believers of this space, really have a tunnel vision. Yeah. They forget about to see all of the other stakeholders in the space, and they really see voting and no centralized organ like a government or a regulatory body or a bank or whatever. And that's what really need to change, because simply if we cannot change that, DeFi will never find its full and true potential, actually. And that's where you need to become more realistic.
Even collaborations, people come together to work together with projects. It allows actually a community which really is no longer decentralized, because you're bringing people together.
Exactly.
That actually has so much benefit.
That has. And I think that's what I mean. If you can form great leadership by combining great leaders, then it becomes a whole different ballgame. And then that whole decentralization angle can still be there. I mean, don't get me wrong. We love blockchain. We love the application of smart contracts. I mean, JP Morgan, all of the big asset managers are applying blockchain technology right now to optimize their flows. And I think we should be doing that, because that's a form of decentralization as well. We're taking away human defaults, basically, of asset managers that fill in the wrong paper, because now it's fully programmed in a smart contract. So there's optimization,
and that's just the use, really utility of the technology. It's people see blockchain as cryptocurrency tokenization, but actually there is just this utility that people can use it in businesses.
And that's really where you get then an optimized flow, where you still have centralized leadership just doing great stuff together. And that's where I see this go. And that's where I also think that in order to keep emotions under control and greed and that kind of stuff, you need to have that framework essentially, right? Where you can say, this is where we draw the line. And I think if you look back at DeFi right now, for the past 5 years, there never has been really a line. It was always, here we have like the legal road, and then here it's all very gray. And then the further you go into that gray area, somewhere it becomes black, and then somewhere it becomes very illegal.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where you never really had a clear boundary. So yeah, this is a very interesting discussion that you can carry forward for a long time, but it takes people like us, actually, like yourself, trying to bring attention to crypto, but also to, for example, females that want to go into crypto, but also for people like me, finding projects, creating products, and also essentially trying to amplify the space to get into a more mature state, in order to get the traction that it deserves, because there is a lot of great application for this technology.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the big businesses out there, people like Binance, they've been spending so much time on their regulation. I mean, it's not a new, we're going to be regulated. They've known for a long time this is coming, and they've been taking the steps. They've got a legal team.
100%.
So really, any project that's starting out should also appreciate that, like the big players, and act upon it. And then when you are looking to invest in a company, is that something you sort of look for, that they're actually taking that on board?
Yeah, no, I think it always, as I mentioned, there's always a couple steps that you will take, right? When you start looking at companies, and at least when you want to invest in them. And I think that this is also a very essential step, or an essential package of steps that anyone should take, because we have seen it all. I mean, people were going all in whatever token was being launched. But I guess that is, especially when you're looking at DeFi, it all starts with, okay, it's DeFi, and how did you actually take care of previous regulations that were having this centralized version of the process that this company or project is trying to disrupt? How was that filled in previously? And then you really start diving into that, and you start asking those questions. And for me, it takes 2 or 3 questions in a community, and I completely know if someone has its regulatory ball game up, yes or no. And that's always the first thing that I look at, because this is something that defines the overall success. As I mentioned, a product is only as good as its adoption.
Yeah.
But if it cannot be adopted because there's one regulatory kind of roadblock somewhere, then this is never going to pump anyway, right? Yeah. And that's something where you can start. Then from there, it's actually also the team. So especially in DeFi products, you can really easily see what kind of team you are dealing with and what is their experience actually in that space. I mean, if I'm launching a real estate platform, it would be pretty handy if I have people in my team, and maybe if I have some real estate experience myself, right?
Of course.
Left, right, center, I see projects popping out of the ground that are going into real estate that don't even have real estate.
Just because they're like, oh, it's a good idea. Let's jump on it.
It's a good idea. It sounds great. Let's jump on it. And that kind of defined, right, this founder industry, which is not weird. I mean, we have seen it with many things. I launched CFD trading like 10 years ago. There were hardly any players in the space. Everyone was saying, yeah, it's crazy, it's unregulated, it's never going to work. And eventually it became perfectly regulated, and it works like a charm. Like 80% of the people have some sort of a trading account going somewhere, which is based on that. We've seen it
people
everywhere.
People try to replicate a lot of what other people are doing. But as for PropChain, you know, how do you differentiate yourself from other projects out there that are doing something similar?
Now, this is actually the full same approach as what I was just mentioning. So we really have been following this whole tokenization space for like 5 years. 2017, we saw this already. Like there were a lot of projects that were trying to do this, but there was zero adoption. And I guess that adoption wasn't there because the technology was too new. Back then, there was no single bank or big asset manager that was respected that ever spoke about blockchain, basically, or it was very minimal, meaning that the overall sentiment for blockchain in general was more or less a scary factor than an amplifying one. And I guess that when watching that industry, I was really looking at where do these things go wrong, right? So why isn't that being adopted? And the majority of them were, first of all, simply not having real estate. Till date, that's still a massive
So they don't
problem.
actually have the real estate.
No, they're just launching a product and then want to raise money with that product in order to buy real estate. That doesn't work.
No.
Then they had zero clues about regulations, so they were not compliant, not in the furthest stage of wherever I could look at. They had any form of compliance offering to retail investors, because you're offering digitized securities basically, which we have. So we have a fully compliant framework for 27 member states in the European Union. So that's something where it starts. Then we had the real estate, and then obviously the other part of the business is really getting the first users on board. And that's where we also really differentiate, because we built the product very patiently. We didn't really need the money because we have this whole venture capital side of our other businesses as well. So we could really incubate it patiently. We have been building the product, then we only opened the rounds for the tokens, and then we kind of started an MVP straight away. And that went very well. We sold 1 million euro of tokenized real estate. We are now actually exiting that first property, so the investors make a really good return, which is amplifying the positive reviews, the case studies. Then we invested heavily in partners and auditors. So we are working with Ernst & Young in Luxembourg to audit our full structure, asset portfolio, incomes. So if I need to compare us with any other player in the space, then how do we differentiate? First of all, professionalism and actual security that you have. I mean, we are not an ID. We are established. We sold already. We have users. We have the mobile application. We have the auditors. We have a very strong legal counsel. And then next to that, I also think it is yours as good as the product, what you are selling, which is real estate. And I think that there we have a very, very strong team. I mean, we have our whole own real estate division brought into this company. You're looking at around 350 million euros worth of track record that is in there. So they know their stuff. And that's also how this portfolio is structured. So the offerings that we do are much different. If you look at the competition, they're offering 200K houses somewhere in a suburb in the US. We have a full stack portfolio in Mexico, in Dubai, a European portfolio that we're currently going to launch on the platform with German real estate, UK real estate. So we have all of that, and I guess that really differentiates, right?
And you're launching a new token.
Yeah, we have decided to put a utility token in place. So we have created a product that is usable for crypto users. So we have like full crypto integration to purchase real estate or tokenized real estate with USDT or Bitcoin or Ethereum. And at the same time, we also have it fully hybridly built that retail users don't have to force themselves into processes like creating wallets and that kind of stuff.
So they can just buy your token and then utilize it.
And the token was actually integrated because we have the strong belief that everything that we do basically should always derive more value. So the token is obviously a very strong mechanism to put into place to get this kind of loyalty program up. So we have a tier system in the platform that gives you discounts on fees and cashbacks and so forth while staking that token. There's a portion of governance. Now we were talking about it that is integrated.
Will it be like a DAO then, or?
Not fully, because we will always have the final decision, as I mentioned. I think great things are built on great leadership, and I guess that we can say that we have that, but we already want to implement it slowly but gradually. And then I think what is very interesting that we are doing is that we're using also the token for gas fees, for validating all of the transactions that we are hosting on the Polygon blockchain. So we're basically utilizing our token on top of the gas fees that are paid in Polygon, which is actually very interesting because that kind of amplifies the tokenomics. It really brings value, or at least the deflationary demand basically to the token. So yeah, that's what we're going to bring to the market now. We have successfully sold out all the rounds.
Amazing.
We're moving on to the market on the 28th of April. And then from there, we slowly but gradually start the implementation, create the organic demand, and then see from there where we end up.
So it creates like an ecosystem, where you can utilize your token.
Yeah.
And will you potentially be able to buy the properties? Will you utilize your token as well for that?
Yeah, that's also on the line. So it's not going to be directly, because we have really decided to not go and create like a lot of selling pressure by doing so. But what we're doing now is that we're kind of launching a second pool where we put the properties, and you can basically put the tokens in that pool in order to start generating returns from that particular pool of properties. So you basically bought into properties with your tokens. And that kind of is also very interesting if you ever want to go to this DeFi thing that we were discussing, is where we have the strategy and the plan to further down the line create a DeFi dashboard where basically people can stake their cryptocurrency, and that will probably be a stable coin based model, but where the yield is actually generated from an actual asset-backed portfolio of properties, which essentially also means that you could, in a further developed stage, when the volume is there, launch a stable coin that actually has an asset
because it's backed. Okay,
because it's backed.
Yeah.
So that's our kind of our end goal with the retail product, at least. Yeah, and then we have a full suite in B2B, which goes from pricing oracles for live AI predicted pricing on real estate assets, tokenized assets, to a centralized marketplace for secondary market transactions, to market making models, instant liquidation pools. There's a whole lot on the roadmap. But this will all get the token integration.
Okay. So actually, if you're getting in early on the token, there's so much potential.
There's a boatload of utility that is really going on.
Where will the token be available? So will it be available?
So first of all, we start with a DEX launch. We have chosen to launch the token on the Ethereum network, purely driven from a volume-based decision. I mean, looking at the Polygon volumes right now, they're not optimal, and I think that that really made us choose for Ethereum. So we will be doing a DEX launch. Then straight after, we'll follow up with centralized exchange, which we will be disclosing shortly.
Okay, exciting times.
Yeah. Now we're doing all the preparational works, right? So you can find us on CoinMarketCap. PropC is the ticker. And yeah, from here, we will actually have everything live straight after. So you can directly start staking. You can directly start filling the liquidity pool, which we're also setting up in a single asset way. So you don't have to buy the LP tokens. You can just chunk in the USDT basically, and you can keep your income high as well on the tokens that you hold over time that we are building this an actual utility.
Yeah.
So that's going to be an interesting ride.
Because a lot of companies, they create tokens for absolutely no reason at all. There's no reason for them to need it.
Exactly.
Whereas you have actually a lot of utilities in your roadmap where it will all tie together and actually be a positive ecosystem that requires a token.
Correct. And I think that's something which is also really typical for this space, right? People for a very long time have seen launching tokens as a very easy fundraising tool, which in fact it is. But you are blowing yourself up if you are not considering that, for example, the token has zero utility, or you really need to force yourself into creating utility. That's where you see these projects never make it. Then next to that, tokenomics are mostly very shitty. They want to launch ultra low market caps to create massive pumps.
No liquidity.
No liquidity at all. No LP programs. It is really a shit show, to be very honest.
And how are you ensuring liquidity within your token?
So we have always been pushing in liquidity, obviously, ourselves. So we're filling a large chunk of the pool. But next to that, we have been very successful with liquidity programs. So where people can kind of stake both ends of the pool. And that builds up. And I think that in the first place, it all comes down to your marketing and community efforts, right?
Yeah.
It's all about who is going to dump back on you. And in the past, we have always seen that the projects where we were involved in were really stable around the launches. So let's find out what it does. But I think with a 200% inflation in the first year, we have been really conservative. And with the demand that we have for the product, which is around 7,000 people that are now on the waiting list, from the token demand that they should generate, we should come into a very stable position where the majority of the tokens will be locked by the staking protocols. So,
and tying it back to a little bit earlier, I'm trying to wrap up a little bit because I'm sure we could go on forever.
For women
that are starting out, you know, getting into understanding a bit about tokenomics and different projects, how do you think it's best to, learn about these projects, not find as many scams, find projects like yourself? What should they be educating themselves about blockchain?
I think that in the first place, you need to understand kind of what it's all about, right? So I think that there's a huge library out there which is called Google, and Google gives you pretty much everything that you need, and
right or wrong sometimes,
right or wrong. But I always say that if you go into your home studies and you compare 20 articles on one topic and you see that 15 have a similar direction, that's mostly the truth. It's as easy as that. And then next to that, I think it's really the case, or the challenge to find like the right communities to be with. And we are going to build actually one ourselves that women can join in order to find really the information that they need on tokenization. So that's kind of the new movement,
I think that's a great, fantastic idea.
And then from there, I think that in general, it starts with, again, basic knowledge and networking. You need to find the people always in any space that you want to move into. Find the buddies where you can talk and chat with, and don't be afraid to ask. I mean, everyone is kind of in this industry to bring it forward, because that's all of our wet dreams, right? That we have to get this as mature as it needs to be.
Yeah.
So that's where we want to go.
We want a whole diverse range of people, from the novices to the people that feel like they know everything. But actually, ultimately, it's really hard to know everything in this industry.
Exactly.
You're a specialist in your field, and I'm sure multiple other fields. But there's, even to the extent that blockchain involves metaverse.
Exactly.
It's crazy.
Exactly.
It's crazy. So just understand.
Finding the way where you want to go essentially is also really important. So if you can find that, then you're basically golden, and take it step by step, one at a time.
Yeah, and if people understand quite a bit about properties, they're interested in properties, why not look into a project like yours?
Exactly.
Because it has real life assets, which a lot of these projects don't have.
The most of what we have seen so far till date was all air backed, and I think that now finally bringing that actual asset backing is going to change the industry for good and for the better. So let's see where it ends up.
Well, hopefully we'll find out a bit more once you have launched your token. We can have a catch up, see how everything's going, talk a bit more about the communities, maybe get some things going on.
I'm looking forward.
Thank you so much, Robin. Great. Thank you for your time. PropChain is such an incredible business, and I'm so excited to see what's to come next. So
let's see.
Thank you.
Thank you.